And this was the last house on the block I wanted to belong to as well. And little did I know where I would end up here in front of all of you tonight. My name is Sandy, a grateful alcoholic. Thank you, Bruce, for asking me to speak tonight. Thank you, Tom, and everybody who makes this meeting possible. I come to it nearly every week myself and just get so much spiritually fed from the people who are willing to come up and share their story. And I know anybody could boo. There's tons of experience in this room tonight, but tonight I'll be sharing mine. But if you want to raise your hand and take my spot, you can. No. And with a lot of gratitude, I just love my family of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was supposed to be here in October of 2024, and life happened. And by the grace of God, my fellow brother here stepped right into my spot and carried the message. And I'm so grateful for how this program works when we ask for help. We just don't do anything alone. You know, Tom, thank you. You told me I could talk for 2 hours tonight, so get out your pillows and your blankets. I do have my clock up here. I'll try to keep it within the line of our 8 o'clock shutdown time. You know, I'm not an expert on alcoholism. I'm not an expert on the big book. By the grace of God and all of you, I found these rooms, and I have an experience that I get to share with you because you shared your experience with me. My sobriety date is May 15th, 1999. I have a sponsor. My sponsor has a sponsor. I sponsor other women, and I'm so grateful for that. You guys have saved my life. I don't know what I've done for you, but I know what you've done for me, and I'm truly grateful. You know, my story begins when I was 5 years old. You know, it does go way back then. I grew up in an alcoholic family. I didn't know it at the time. If I going a couple rounds with the 12 steps, you get to see things way clearer than when I got through these doors. And my family was amazing. They were so loving, but if they knew better, they'd do better. It goes back in both sides of my family, both generations. My mom was a World War II survivor, lost everything, came to America, immigrant, and my dad fought in the war as well. Fast forward, you know, my mom was from Europe. Her great, wonderful mother, my grandmother, every year would send over these chocolate liqueur candies for holidays, for Christmas, for Easter. And I was the one who could not wait for that box to arrive. And I was waiting for it, and it would arrive, and I'd tear into it. And, you know, nobody really noticed, but, you know, I would, take that one bite, and that chocolate liqueur would burst into my mouth, and then it would go down my throat, and it's nice and warm, and I start feeling a little headed, and then it was, you know, one was one too many, and the whole box was never enough. And, you know, I didn't know that at the time, but I certainly had alcoholic tendencies before I started drinking alcoholically. You know, and fast forward, I would see in my inventory and look back and, you know, see these crazy behaviors I had at like 10, 11, and 12. I'd have these projects, and I'd be super obsessive about it, and I could not let it go. It led to 24/7 project. And, you know, again, I don't know where my parents were, but they weren't all that concerned that I was locked up in a closet somewhere doing my sewing projects and wouldn't stop. And they were like ski jackets and ski parkas and all these crazy things. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't quite understand it. I also didn't feel a part of in my family. I felt very different. My sister and brother had friends on the street. We lived in a very active neighborhood, kicked the can, all those fun things you did during the summer. And I just felt like the odd man out, so I just isolated a lot, which explains a lot of my alcoholic behavior and drinking, as you'll get into my story later on. So I was just seeing all these things that just were uncomfortable for me. And moving into, you know, high school and college, and, you know, I found the drink. I found outside issues as well, too, but I never had any consequences. I would be able to do all those things and show up and do decent grades and, you know, keep doing the next indicated thing. You know, and I also found men. I also found boys who drank way too much than they should have, and I fell in love with them. And later, you know, just before I went off to college, I met him. His ride was a 10-speed Schwinn. He had a rap sheet as long as my arm. And he just bankrupt on drugs and alcohol. And I fell in love. It was love at first sight. And then we got married. Of course, that's what we do. That's what I did. And we had 2 beautiful boys. And, you know, he had found AA about 3 years into our marriage, and our life was getting super stable, and things were getting really sweet and tender. And then we got a diagnosis. We got a terminal diagnosis in our 5th year of marriage, and it just ripped our lives apart. And, for me, I turned to a power greater than myself, and that's when I turned to alcohol. And that's where I believe I crossed the line. Not because my husband had a terminal diagnosis. I could see way back that I had a lot of those isms going on. I had the obsession. I had the disease of more, one was never enough. But at that point, I just started going out with the girls, started getting my drink on. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Then as his disease progressed with his physical ailments, my alcoholism progressed. And then it became fun with problems. I was in graduate school. I knew I would be the family provider for my boys and my 2 boys. And, all the pressure was just building up on me. I started sneaking it into the house. I started hiding it. They would all go to bed, and I would just be game on, just alone and drinking. Fast forward, he passed away around, I believe, our 7th year of marriage. He lived about 3 years, and I had a chance to move out of the area and take my kids with me. I finished graduate school, was ready to get into my career. And so I moved up to Northern California. I thought I just needed a break. I didn't know that then, but I was pulling a geographic, And what I've come to believe is that wherever I go, there I am. So I get up to Northern California, and I'm still drinking, I'm still sneaking, and I'm, putting my kids to bed at 7 o'clock at night on a summer. The kids are outside playing like, Mom, what's going on? They're all having fun. And I was like, hey, no, you need to go. I just didn't want to have them see me drinking. I felt so much shame and guilt over it. I just kept doing, my disease I was a periodic drinker. I would stop for a while and dry up, and then I get off to the races again. I started dating, so there was my other drink on 2 legs, and I started enjoying that very much. And, things would just started kind of snowballing. And every time I'd wake up sick and tired of being sick and tired, of course, I was dating somebody who was drinking. And I'd like, geez, I got to get rid of this guy. I'd dump the relationship, I'd dry up for a couple weeks, and then I'd start dating again, and off to the races I go. And this just kept happening over and over again. So I started self-help books, I started going to therapy, but I just couldn't stop. I stopped, but I just couldn't stay stopped. I didn't know how to live sober. And one morning, and once again, I wake up sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I look in the mirror in the bathroom, and I go, God, I gotta. And I just stopped right there. And something greater than me had me look at myself in the eyes. And I said, oh my God, he doesn't drink. I've got a problem. And the denial was absolutely shattered in that moment in time. And I just went, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? It was like 7 a.m. I had to get the kids to school. I had to do something, so I got the kids to school. And there was only one person I knew in Alcoholics Anonymous who had called me a year before. And I go, I got to call her. And I picked up the phone and I called her. And the reason why I knew she was an alcoholic was I was working with women as a marriage and family therapist intern. That was my degree, marriage and family therapist, psychologist. That was my grad work. I was working with women coming out of prison and other institutions into a 24/7 recovery program. And I was a closet alcoholic. And she called me a year prior and she thought I was the expert. And I'll call the expert and she'll know what to do. And she called me and she hit her bottom on alcohol and outside issues. And I said, well, Megan, I'll take you to your first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And we went that night. And I picked up that 5,000-pound phone and I called her and I said, Megan, I've got a problem. I need help. And she said, Sandy, I'll take you to your first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's exactly what she did. And she took me to a women's meeting. And I sat in Half Measures Row, that back row, and I just bawled and I cried, and everybody just loved on me and said, keep coming back. And I started going to more meetings, getting in the middle of the herd, and I got gratefully a sponsor early on. Megan said, you got to do this deal, you got to ask somebody for help, and I did. And my sponsor said, so what do you do? And I said, well, this is what I do. I work with women in a treatment program over in Salinas, and I've been dealing with this myself. And she says, well, you need to go talk to your supervisor at your job. I go, I might just lose that. This is my whole career. I'm bread and butter with my family. And she says, okay, if you want to stay sober, you've got to clean this up with your supervisor. So I went in there to work, and I asked for time to speak with her. And I told her what had happened. I hit my bottom. I came skidding into AA. I've been drinking this whole time while I've been working with others. And she looked at me and she said, well, how do you think I got here? You applied for the job and you showed your resume. You know, oh, no, I'm an alcoholic too. I was working with others. I was working in a treatment program in Southern California. And I went, oh, my gosh. And she said, you know, Sandy, if you get a sponsor, check, start working the steps, trying, and double up your supervision with me, and you can keep your job. And I just went, oh, by the grace of God, there go I. Yeah, just a total miracle. So, there began my journey with Alcoholics Anonymous. That love affair started to ignite within my life. And I started being of service, getting in the middle of the herd. My life started getting better and better and better. And, fast forward 10 years, my career was taken off, my love life was taken off, and the life that AA gave me got in the way of my AA life. I started going to meetings, once a month, maybe twice a month, very rarely talking to my sponsor, wasn't working with others, wasn't showing up for any service or putting my hand up to be of any help to anybody. It was all about me. And I was getting irritable and discontent. It's funny how that happens when you're not, doing this thing one day at a time. And at the same time, at that juncture in my life, my youngest son, who was just launching off into his adulthood, was really showing signs of difficulty. He was trying to do well in college, and he was struggling, and I'm thinking, okay, mental illness runs in our family. It goes on both sides back. I could see the depression. I could see the mania. We'll get him a therapist. So he gets a therapist, and things just aren't getting better. And one day I'm in the store. I need to pick up bread for lunch, and I'm on my way to the bread aisle. And right as I'm getting into the bread aisle, they put up a brand new wine kiosk. And I got a case of the Effets. And I just went, because that very moment that I got my eyeball on that wine kiosk, I realized that my son is struggling with the same thing I've struggled with and his dad struggled with, alcohol and other outside issues. And I went, nobody's going to know if I pick up this bottle. Nobody's going to know. My disease was already talking to me. And I stopped dead in my tracks because I've heard all of your voices in my head, and I have my cell phone in my pocket, and I picked it up, and I ran out of that store, and I dialed my sponsor. And you know what she said? She giggled and she said, you can do that. You can drink. You have the choice to do that. And then she played that tape through for me right to the next morning. And then she said to me, Sandy, and then what? And you know what? She was right. And she said two very important things to me. And I can tell you right now, when I started working with her, when I first got through these doors, I didn't do everything she said. And I did come in with the gift of desperation. But I was really paying attention this day because I knew if I picked up, it would be a long road back if I even got back here. This disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. I watched so many others go out and not come back, or come back with everything gone and lost. And I pushed that limit already once, and I didn't want to do it again. And she said, you've got to do two things. One, you got to get back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and work with others because your life depends upon it. And every time you take somebody through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to go through those steps too. I said, okay. She said, two, you need to get our sister program, Al-Anon, because your son's life depends upon it. You know what? She was right. And so for whatever reason, by the grace of God, I claimed my seat back in the rooms. And, the women who started asking me for help were my son's age. It blew me away. They wanted what I had. Before I got into that other sister program, I was fully out of control with him. I knew what meetings he should go to. I knew what sponsor he should have, and our relationship was hanging by a thread. I'd done so much damage by pushing solutions and forcing solutions. So I claimed my seat. I got out of his way. I got off his back. I got back on with my life in the solution. And, I don't know if any of those women got anything from my sponsorship, but they saved me. And that's what I've learned in these rooms, that if I don't give back what's been so freely given to me, I'm not going to make it. I can't keep what I have. And fast forward, it took 3 years for my son to hit his bottom. And through the 12 steps, the same 12 steps we work in here, I worked it in the other program. I gave him the dignity that I got myself to hit my bottom and find these rooms and know that I needed help. And after those 3 years, he got it. He got sober. He was working with others. He was helping a lot of people. And his life was on track. And I was so grateful. And our relationship was absolutely healing. And I was just letting him in his higher power, because I was his higher power. I fired myself right away on that one. And he was leading a really beautiful life. And I just kept right where I am, right in the middle of the herd. And my love affair with Alcoholics Anonymous was reignited once again, and I have not looked back. After 6 years of sobriety for that young man, he had a relapse on outside issues that bring him back into drinking again. And he wanted to get sober so bad. And by the grace of God and all of you and the love that's in these rooms, I had nothing but love and compassion for him. I didn't tell him what to do. I didn't tell him where to go. All I told him was, I'm behind you. I will absolutely 100% support wellness and recovery. And he went back. He went back into the rooms. I love our third tradition here. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And the doors were always open to him, just like they're always open to us. So if that's a part of your story, I welcome you. Welcome home. Welcome back. And you all welcomed my son back too. And he felt the love, but he just couldn't get his legs back underneath him. And he was back into treatment in Houston, Texas. And he asked me to come out and visit with him. And he was trying so hard. And this was in 2022, in August of 2022. So I went back and I visited him. And he became unresponsive to where he was living. And he was in a hotel at this point. He had left his recovery program. I was about there for 3 days. And I was out. And I told the manager, if he's not going to answer, would you please call me? And the manager called me while I was out, just anxious, driving around, trying to get my mind off of things. And he says, we're going to go in. We can't, he's not responding. And I said, okay, great. Please wait till I get there. And I got there, and he opened up the door, and he had already passed. He had committed suicide. And, the manager came up to me and he said, who can you call? Who can you call? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't live here. I'm in shock, and my mind's absolutely fogged. And then it hit me. I've been in the middle of AA in the other program in Houston for over 10 years. Every time I go visit him, I have a whole family here. And I picked up that phone and I called a member of Alcoholics Anonymous who lived about 30 minutes away from the hotel I was staying in. And he said, I'll be there. I'm 10 minutes away from your hotel. No mistakes. If it's odd, it's God. And he showed up right then and there. And then he called the women, and they showed up right then and there. And I did not have to do a single thing alone. They picked me up and took me to meetings every single day as I was transitioning to come back with my son and having to go through all those steps. They went to those meetings with me, not only in the rooms, but to get his body home with me. I didn't do anything alone. One of the meetings I went to, a young man came up to me afterwards. They do it all wrong over there. They call on you and they make you talk. You tell them you're out of town, and all of a sudden you have to share. And a young man came up to me and he said, I'm really sorry for your loss. And he gave me a really big hug, felt like my son was hugging me. And I looked up at him and I said, you look a lot like my son. And he says, you look a lot like my mom. She passed away last year from cancer. We helped each other. Another meeting I went to, this young man came up to me afterwards and he said, ma'am, it is not your fault. You are not responsible for the choice your son made. And I looked up at him and he had a scar from ear to ear. He attempted to take his life pretty recently. It was a pretty fresh scar. And he said, I was on the phone to the suicide hotline. I was on the phone to my sponsor, and there was nothing that was going to get in the way of me and taking my life. And he said, by the grace of God, I'm still here, but I want you to know you're not responsible. And I so needed to hear that as a parent in that very moment. And I got to come home within 10 days with my son. And the moment I got here, my AA and my other family just jumped on top of me and carried me through. And we were able to pull together, and I was relying on my family here to pull together an amazing celebration of life for my son, one for the books. And my family, who I'm the only one in the program, would look at all my people, all of you who showed up for him and for me, and would say, who are these people? The people I have coffee with, the people I go and talk to and have walks with, people who have saved my life and saved his life for as long as they could. And 6 months before my son passed away, I was walking on the beach, and I've been hiking and walking my entire, 30 years from, my entire sobriety. And I looked down one day as I'm walking on the beach, 6 months before he passed away, and there's this incredible heart rock. I've never seen a heart rock anywhere I've walked. And I pick it up, it's about the size of my hand, and it's got this nice worn spot on it. And I thought, I'm going to give this to him. And I see him, he came to visit me, and I said, here's this heart rock, and he's struggling, he's having a really hard time. And I said, you keep this in your pocket, and whenever you think you're alone, you just remember God's with you, your family's with you, and we love you so much. And you know what? He fell in love with that heart rock. And every time he would visit, he would pull it out of his pocket. He carried it with him. He put it on his nightstand, and he slept with it. He told me he put it, it was with him all the time. He said, look, Mom, I got it. It just warmed my heart. I had no idea what something as small as that would mean to a young man like him, who was struggling to beat this disease with whatever he could. And the day of his celebration of life, my family, all of you knew that story, and you painted hundreds of heart rocks to honor my son that day, for everybody who came to honor him, to leave with, to keep in their pocket, to know how much God loved them. I can't make this stuff up. I would have missed all of this. So fast forward, when I got back from Houston, I do want to say, I got to sit on my patio with another member and started working the steps, because that's what we do here. And as I'm sitting on my patio under a 6-foot umbrella, out comes this hummingbird, eye level, 20 seconds. I'm like, oh my God, God's telling me he's okay, and he's here, and he's free. That's the only thing that young man wanted to be, was free. He's free of his mental illness, he's free of this addiction, he's fully whole. Not only did that bird come once, it came twice, 20 minutes later. And that's just God telling me, when I just show up and I get present and I do what's suggested, these are the gifts I get: heart rocks, hummingbirds. And when I turned around, when that hotel manager called me, I was underneath a tree in this parking lot, and there were hundreds of dragonflies surrounding my car. And I was filled with peace, and I knew God was in charge and going before me. So, fast forward, a couple years later, my oldest son, who has two beautiful, beautiful children, my grandchildren, had a medical emergency in my home, age 37. And his wife was yelling for me, and I went up there and we got into the room where he was. And he was unresponsive and yet struggling for air. And we called 911, and they took him and they ran the tests. And at age 37, he had a deep brain aneurysm. And this is October 2024. And this is what happened, where Craig stepped in and got to the podium to carry the message to all of you. And, when they did the MR, the PET scans and all that, there was no coming back for him. And he left behind a beautiful 5-month-old daughter, a beautiful wife, and a beautiful 10-year-old daughter. And you know what? Instead of picking up a drink, like I did when my husband was diagnosed, and I was on that journey, I picked up the phone once again, and I called all of you. You came to the hospital, you brought meals, you surrounded us with love, and you just didn't let me go, and you didn't let my family go. And I did not have to walk through that 1 iota minute alone. I am forever grateful. I am so grateful. I drank way too much to find all of you. Truly. I would have missed all of this. And anywhere I go, I find my people. Of all places, Houston, Texas. Isn't that another country? You know? But it's all there. The solution's all there. There's been a lot of loss. There's been a lot of tragedy. But there's been a lot of gifts. There's been a lot of joy. There's been a lot of healing. You know, this is my 26th year, by the grace of God, in May, hopefully to be my 27th. I don't know what I'd do without all of you. The gift of this all is that higher power. You know, I tried all those things, those outside helps, which I still use today, therapy and self-help books, but I do it with a higher power. I do 6 and 7 with a higher power. I don't remove my character defects. And here's the greatest gift of all. You know, this is a one day at a time deal, and I still have to keep doing everything I did when I got here. I still have to keep working the steps. A year before my oldest son passed away, my higher power tapped me on the shoulder once again and said, you know, you got some wreckage you need to clean up with this young man. You know, you need to do a step 10. You know, I sat down with him and I said, you know, I told him I needed to talk to him, just like my sponsor told me to do, and I have to clean up some things with you. And he said, sure. And he actually asked his wife to come sit next to him, which was totally fine with me. She's a wonderful person and a great support to him. And I went through my list, and at the end of the list, I said, is there anything else? And gratefully he said, let me think about it. And I thought, for sure I was off the hook. And I wouldn't have to do this anymore with him. You know what? He came back to me 2 weeks later and he says, you know what, Mom, I'm ready to talk. I said, okay. And we sat down at the kitchen table, and his wife sat next to him. He's very techie, very new age. I'm a dinosaur. I put everything on paper, but he had his whole list in his phone. And he went through it very painstakingly, you know. He went to the first item, and I said, and you got, you know, how I responded the exact way you guys responded to me. You listened, and I listened. You loved me, I loved him. And I told him he was right, and I'm sorry. And he did that for 30 minutes. And I think at 31 minutes, he looked at that item and he said, you're not doing this anymore. I go, yeah, I've been really working hard at it. You know, he was noticing living amends. This is what we get to do in these rooms. And then he got to the next one, because he was not going to stop there. And he was really surprised, and he looked at me and he says, you're not doing this one anymore either. I said, yeah, I've been really trying. You know, it took another 30 minutes to finish his list, and I wanted him to, but literally each one, he was absolutely surprised, and he says, you're not doing this anymore. You know, and at the end of that time, sitting across from him, and I said, let's not let so much time go by to, you know, when things we'd step on each other's toes, and we get our feelings hurt. I'm such a sensitive alcoholic, you know? And I hugged him, and, you know, hugging him before this moment literally was hugging a 2x4. And there was a sweet little softness to it. And every hug thereafter, it was never quite un-2x4, but it was a lot gentler and a lot sweeter. And I owe it all to Alcoholics Anonymous that our relationship started to get healed. And it was healing. And there was a new energy between us. I'm so grateful for that. And I know that when he left this planet so suddenly and unexpectedly, our business was done. We had cleaned it up. And that wouldn't have happened if you guys didn't do for me what I could not do for myself in a power greater than myself. So it's been a year and a half. I have a wonderful 20-month-old granddaughter who's just putting 2 words together. I have an 11-year-old granddaughter who actually lived with us the majority of time. Her dad had a huge amount of custody for a father. He had all medical rights, he had physical custody, he had educational rights. The mother lives in San Diego County. And when he passed away, I petitioned for custody. And you all just got behind me with it and loved me. And I didn't get what I wanted, but I got grandparent visitation, court ordered, which is just such a gift and such a blessing. You know, I got to pick her up this Friday, to bring her for a visit. And she gets in the car, And she goes, freedom, take me home, Grandma. I'm so grateful, you know. And then she asked, can we make Daddy's memory box this weekend? And that's what we've been doing, you know. I'm just so honored that I get to do these things with her. Another weekend she came, she says, you know, Nana, your Declan's my protector. You know, they notice that she sees me showing up. And I'm like, well, God's really our protector, but I'm happy to show up and be his voice and do whatever I can for you. You know, and I get all of this. You know, I had picked up that drink when I was in that grocery store. I would have missed all of this. I don't know where I would have gone. You know, this disease is cunning, baffling, and powerful. You know, and I've got this relationship with my daughter-in-law, who I now call my daughter, that is absolutely, she wants to go on vacations with me. We camp together in a 32-foot RV with 2 kids, a husky. We do it in the winter, we do it in the summer, and we take the kids with us and we have a ball. I'm so grateful. So if you're new or nearly new in this program, don't leave before the miracle happens. You so deserve this amazing life. You know, just do what our speakers already said, and congratulations to our newcomers. Welcome home, our milestone chip takers and our birthday people. Just grab the hand, if you're new, of another alcoholic, get a big book, and start working these steps. You know, this whole thing about this higher power, my higher power that I came in with was the God of my childhood, was absolutely not working for me, waiting for me to do the next wrong thing. My sponsor told me, write that help wanted ad now, you need a higher power and you're not it. And I did what she suggested. And I put all those qualities down, you know, and the hoop we get to jump through in our 12 and 12 says is really wide. And I found a higher power. And I started praying on that higher power because that's what she told me to do when I started reading all those qualities. And that higher power became true in my life. You know, I sponsor a woman today who's 82 years old. And she has been agnostic and she's finally found a higher power and she calls it Twink. Her life is blowing up. You know, it's something other than ourselves, and the miracles happen. So, you know, I'm just so grateful for all the love I found in all these rooms, for all of you, and I could go anywhere, and guess what, you guys can too. The solution is always there if I'm willing. Grateful to be here tonight, grateful to share with all of you. Keep coming back. I thank God for AA, and I thank AA for God.
Let's thank our speaker again. Woo-hoo!